Hey everyone, Pat Belliveau here. It is Saturday, the 15th of November. Um, Another interview with Greg Bush. We had three. We were supposed to do a fourth, and then we got sidetracked. So we're coming back around to do the fourth one now. So this is the sixth video in our series, but our fourth video, just the two of us. So hopefully you're keeping track of all that. So here it is, video number 4 between the two of us. And we're going to go back to Greg's early days in Montreal and why he chose the wrong instrument to start to play as a professional. But, you know, we all don't always make good decisions in our lives. But anyway, he can explain that. Over to you.
Over to me, yeah.
He should have took up saxophone, but he didn't. But anyway.
Well, I came close.
Oh, you did you? I didn't know that.
A little bit close. Yeah, well, growing up in Montreal, you know, and being an Anglophone or whatever, I lived in a Francophone district. And then my parents moved when I was around 9, and it was pretty much still kind of Francophone district, but also multicultural. It was like United European nations, maybe. Oh, no, there was South
What
American.
part of Montreal was it? What section?
I was in the north end of Montreal,
okay.
Ville Saint Michel. So I had, but it was, other than French, it was predominantly Italian. So I had several Italian friends. I had a Greek friend, I had a Czechoslovakian friend, Yugoslavian friend, and a cat from Argentina.
Oh, there you go. Quite the United Nations going on there.
It was, yeah, a little bit of the United Nations. But in elementary school, there was no music. It was kindergarten to grade 7. But in grade 5, you learned the recorder. And
grade 6 for me.
Well, yeah. It was, yeah. I mean, how much fun is the recorder? But I don't know. Have you checked out that cat from France?
Yes, I have.
Playing the Michael Brecker solos on the recorder. Yeah, he's killing it.
Yeah,
it's pretty funny. Mm-hmm. Clifford Brown and Brecker and and it looks like he's handicapped in terms of I think he doesn't have his sight, and he's just killing it on the recorder. But anyway, that was a little bit of that. There was a guitar in the house, which I kind of figured out how to play Satisfaction by the Stones on it, and that was it. And then in grade 7, the high school band director came to the school to recruit, you know, and they give you this aptitude test. And I guess I scored quite high on the aptitude test because I could sing and carry a tune and could hear one pitch from another and clap back rhythms and shit. So then I get the interview and he's like, "What do you think you'd like to take in band?" Well, it's 1967, I guess. And it would have been 67. And the Beatles are like killing it, right? The Stones and all that. So I'm like, "Oh, I want to play the guitar. I want to play the guitar." And he's like, "Yeah, we don't offer the guitar. You have to choose a band instrument." Well, there were Benny Goodman records in the house, you know, and I was like, "Okay, well, I was told I had to have a second choice, so probably the clarinet." And he's like, "Okay." So anyway, fast forward to September of the next year. I'm in grade 8 in high school, and in the band class, it's like choose your instruments, and it was a different band teacher. The cat that had come and done the interviews and the recruiting, who had been my 2 older brothers' band teacher, he split. I don't know whether he retired or he went somewhere else. So it's a different band teacher. And the guy was a woodwind expert. I think he'd been into military bands, and then he was doing studio work and stuff in Montreal. And he would demonstrate on the clarinet and the saxophone. And what I knew at the time, it sounded to me like he was playing the shit out of them, you know. So anyway, I was like, "Okay, I think I want to try the clarinet." And he's like, "Okay." So anyway, we're in band class, you know, and it's like, "Okay, so you got to hold it this way because you got to be careful, be gentle because you don't want to bend the key, and then you got to hold it like this and don't, you know." And I'm like doing all of this shit, you know, and all of a sudden, ding, 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 the bell goes off. And I'm still like, the other guys and girls in the class, they're like honking and shit, and I'm like, I can't put it together.
So you pulled an Alex Dean and put a lighter and then held it.
So I get home, you know, and I'm telling my 2 older brothers, and they both played a brass instrument. I want to say, I guess the baritone, like euphonium, you know.
Was that Victor or Jim that did that?
Well, that was Jim for sure. And then I can't remember if Victor had played the same thing, maybe. But anyway, so they're like, "Try a brass instrument, try the trumpet, you know." And one of them goes, "He's going to ask you to buzz your lips, do this." So I'm like, okay. I'm like 13 years old, you know, so I'm running around doing that. You know, I think band was every other day. So I get into the band class the next session, you know, I was like, yeah, Mr. Dion, yeah, Donald Dion. I don't think the clarinet's for me. Can I try something else? I'd like to try the trumpet. And sure shoot, man, he goes, okay, let me see you buzz your lips. I was like, I got this. He's like, okay, go grab a trumpet. Well, they were cornets. Go grab a cornet, you know, and it seemed to work. It seemed to fit, you know. So I took that home, and I always like practicing it, you know.
And it only had 3 buttons too, so
It only had
go.
3 buttons, and there was only two parts to assemble. Put
There
the
you go.
mouthpiece in, away you go.
Totally the choice.
Totally. And sometimes the mouthpiece was stuck in the school horn, so I didn't even have to worry about assembling it, you know. And yeah, I just like playing it. I can remember like trying to play pop tunes from the radio and little folk tunes and stuff like that. And I still hadn't learned how to notate music. So I'd write down the letter names. I didn't need to write down the fingerings. I learned the fingerings pretty quickly. So I'd write down the letter names, you know, and then if the next note went up, I put a little arrow going up. If it went down, I put a little arrow going down, you know. So I had my little booklet of tunes written out with just the letter names of the notes to help me remember how they went. But basically I was playing them, figuring them out and playing them by ear, which was not a bad thing, you know. But then, of course, you run into where the band teacher says, quit that noodling and play what's on the page. And then I started focusing more on that rather than continuing to learn little tunes and things like that, you know, which I had to start doing that in college. And then I'm Facebook friends with a kid from high school. I haven't seen him in like 50 years, I guess. But we're Facebook friends, and he played the trumpet. And I remember the band teacher chose a little duet for us to do with the band, and it was called the Comrades Polka. So here's the two of us standing up playing this little trumpet duet, you know, and sitting down.
Oh, is there a recording of it somewhere? That would be cool.
I wonder. That would be so cool. So cool to hear that, you know. And then, and I was always interested in checking out other instruments, you know. And of course, band teachers are smart, you know. I'd go, can I take a trombone home this weekend? And he's like, okay, well, let me hear you. I want to hear these 3 scales, G, D, and A. If you can learn those 3 scales by Friday, you can take the trombone home. I go, okay, I can do that. So of course I learned them, and then I'd go to see him to get the bones. Like, let me hear you play those scales. I play the scales. Like, okay, take a trombone home. So I took a trombone home once, messed around on it, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, you know. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm like, I want to try the flute. Can I try the flute? Can I take the flute home? I'm like, how hard can the flute be? It's this long, right?
So easy to carry too. It's got to be simple.
So he says, okay, 3 scales for next week, you know, E flat, A flat, and D flat or whatever. I was like, okay, I can come back, play the scales, take the flute home. That was the worst, man. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't think I ever got
and you're just like,
I don't think I ever got a sound out of it. I was like, whoa, this long or not, there must be a trick to it, you know? So, and then I would return that, and he's like, how'd that one go? And I'm like, yeah, no. So that was the extent of flirting with other instruments. And I remember I wasn't taking care of business in school, you know, and there would have been another band teacher. There was the first guy for 2 years, and then another guy, French horn player, for 2 years. And he was a Brit, Peter Pike, not Peter Piper, but Peter Pike. I don't know what he packed, but anyway, he was kind of cool.
Peppers, apparently.
He was okay. And he'd let me in the band room. He's like, shouldn't you be in class? I'm like, oh, no, I got a spare. And he's like, right. And he never said anything. So anyway, I got called into the principal's office one day. And he's like looking at my report cards and the reports from the teachers and how many classes I've skipped and everything. And he's like, so, seem to spend a lot of time in the band room. I'm like, yes, sir. And this would have been around the time where they were starting to implement shop into the schools. And of course, back then, you know, the sexes were segregated. The girls didn't take shop, and the boys sure as shooting didn't take home ec. Yeah. Right. And hairdressing. They implemented the hairdressing. course, nowadays, everybody takes whatever. So he says to me, you spend a lot, you're cutting classes and going to the band room. I was like, yeah. I said, yes, sir. I should go to class. He's like, what do you want me to do? He says, arrange it so that you can spend the whole day in the band class, in the band room. And my eyes lit up, and he noticed that right off the bat. He must have sensed, oh, I should have said that to him. So he immediately followed up with, what would your parents say about that? And I'm like, oh, yeah, parents. I was like, I don't think they'd like that, sir. He's like, okay, so what are you going to do? I was like, I'll go to class. I'll do my homework. He's like, okay. So I kind of smartened up a little bit, you know, and go right through high school.
Yeah.
Jesus. And then it was like, okay, well, now what, you know? And as much as my oldest brother had gone to he took a couple of years off between high school and going to become a teacher. And in those days, you didn't need a bachelor's degree to be a teacher. You just needed, I think it was a 1-year teacher's college.
My mom was the same. She had a two-year diploma or something like that from University of Alberta.
Yeah.
And then she was able to get a gig. And then
Yeah.
she went back to finish.
Yeah, maybe it was 2 years. And that's exactly what my brother did. He went to night school and then summers, you know, and he whittled away at his degree and he got it. And then my middle brother quit school. I think he was in grade 9 when he quit. School wasn't really for him. So the concept of, you know, getting a job or going to college or whatever was left pretty open. I think my dad would have been just as happy for me to go get a job. I think my mom was kind of like pushing to go to school. And in Montreal and Quebec, they have a CEGEP, right? You go to grade 11. High school goes to grade 11, and then you do 2 years of CEGEP. And that ends up being like your grade 12 year and the equivalent of your first year of university. It's free. I don't know if it still is, but it was free back then. And then you only need 3 years of university for a bachelor's degree. It's the same amount of schooling, but then it's a way, I think it was implemented so that a university became a little bit more affordable because you were paying for 3 years instead of 4. So it was a 2-year program. It was 6 courses every term. So this would have been my first disastrous experience with music history. So at the end of the 2 years, I had 17 of the out of 24 credits. I think I had 15. Yeah. I had 15 of the 16 music courses. I just couldn't get that music history. And I think I must have had 60.
Boy, I sure don't know how that feels. Ouch.
And I had, there was 4 Englishes and 4 humanities that you had to take. And I took the English class. I passed one of the English classes because at the time, the English teacher was one of the Canadian editors of the National Lampoon. I know. So class consisted of, what do you guys want to do today? So it was kind of entertaining. So I would go to those classes. I remember him calling me up in like early December, you know, mid-December of my first semester. And he's like, yeah, so I'm just doing the grades here. What grade would you like? I'm like 17 years old. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'm like, excuse me? He's like, what grade would you like in my class? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, you know, think of something. I was like, well, what's the class average? He's like, well, it's sitting at a B right now. I was like, okay, I think I'm okay with B. He's like, you don't want an A? I was like, I thought maybe it was a trick question. I was like, no, I think I'm okay with B. He's like, okay, thanks. Merry Christmas. Have a good holiday. That was it. I got a B in English. No humanities. And of course, in those days, nothing was online, right? If you wanted to drop a class, you had to show up at the registrar's office. So I'd go to these classes and I'm like, go to some jive English class or some jive humanities class and go, well, this is bullshit. I just want to go play my trumpet. So I'd go to drop the class. And of course, the lineup would be around the block, you know. And I'm like, how long you been in line? Oh, like 20 minutes. It's probably another 10 or 15, 20 minutes to go. And I'm like, I'm not freaking lining up for half an hour to drop a stupid course. So I wouldn't drop them. So of course,
you get an F.
You know, I got an F. So my transcript was full of Fs. And then, so after 2 years, I get a letter from the school that says, okay, because of your wonderful record, if you wish to continue, you have to appear before a committee of faculty and your peers to figure out how we're going to do this. And fortunately, by then I was 18, and of course the mail's coming to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my parents see this, I'm toast. They're going to make me go get a job. So I decided to take a year off. I probably ended up like being 2 years off, maybe, I can't remember. And worked part-time and practiced trumpet all the time, And then as soon as I was 21, I was eligible to apply to university as a mature student. So I did, and I got into Concordia. And then the courses that I was successful in CJIP transferred. So I had like pretty much almost a year done at Concordia. But then it was the same thing. I was just not motivated to do the electives or the English. I just wanted to show up and play in the band and lessons and stuff. And then
Did you ever consider McGill or University of Montreal at all, or what made you go to Concordia out of those?
University of Montreal, my French wouldn't have been good enough. I wouldn't have been able to keep up because the classes would have been done in French. And then at McGill, there was no jazz program. And I'd had such a horrible experience with classical music that I just didn't want to go there. Plus, I still was struggling a little bit with the trumpet, And the trumpet teacher that I had, Réal Mathieu, that really straightened me out. At Concordia, they were allowing the students, within reason, of course, to choose their own teachers. So I go for the interview. I apply, I get in, I go for the interview, and the guy that was in charge at the time, I think he's passed away now. He said, "So I guess you'll continue with playing with your lessons with James Ranty." And he recently passed away, like a couple of years ago, I think. He was the principal trumpet in the Montreal Symphony. Very, very nice man and a wonderful trumpet player. Obviously, if he's principal in the Montreal Symphony, but clueless as a teacher for anybody that's kind of struggling. So the lessons with him were a disaster. And so when they said you can continue with Jimmy Ranty, I was like, I thought we could sort of choose our own teachers. And he's like, well, yeah, within reason. And who do you have in mind? So I told him, I said, well, I've been taking lessons with Réal Mathieu. And I said, it's working for me. I said, I'd like to get in. Oh, yeah, no, sure. Réal's fine. Yeah, that'd be fine. You can continue with that. So, so that was a big selling feature to go to Concordia. Plus, it was jazz. The emphasis was on jazz. So there was a big band. At the time, there was a McGill big band. There were no students in it. It was
all ringers.
It was all ringers and maybe 2 or 3 strong students that were in the classical program because they would have been studying classical sax and classical trumpet and so on. There was a saxophone player by the name of Simon Stone, and there was a trumpet player by the name of Dave Nutting who passed away, not very old, he had cancer. Otherwise, they were all pros. I mean, the band was killer, and then there was a second big band that had mostly students.
When did the jazz program start at McGill then? Do you remember?
After I moved away in 1980. I want to say like around 84, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It was once, I think Kevin Dean was hired to write the program. He was at St. FX, an American guy. And then Gordon Foote was at St. FX at the same time. And then Gordon got on at McGill, and then that's when everything kind of changed. But I remember even there, with the jazz program, you had to do all of the classical coursework and then the jazz courses. So the students in the jazz program, if they got through their degree in 4 years, they were freaking exhausted. They were like done, burned out to keep up that pace. And I remember Gordon Foote telling me, he said over the years, every year they'd win one battle, Why do they need to take counterpoint? Okay, ditch the counterpoint. Why do they need to take a whole semester of Renaissance music? Okay, let's do something different with the classical music history and lump them into one semester or one course. He says every year not every year did they win the battle. He says, but it took quite a while to whittle it down to where the jazz degree was manageable and there were fewer and fewer classical courses that the jazz guys had to do.
I remember Gord Foote telling me he and I adjudicated together one time in Ottawa, and I think it was at this point when he was telling me this. He said, I used to say to classes when I had classical degree majors in, he'd say, the jazz majors are going to have a more well-rounded education when they leave here, because the fact that they have to take all of the classical stuff first, and then they have to take their jazz courses. You guys don't have to do that. And he said they come out of here with a lot more, like a bigger fundamental base of music across the board that way.
I agree. Yeah, because they had to do it all.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then, I was 26 years old, got married, was kind of tired with school, wanted to have a career playing music. And of course, what was going on in Quebec and Montreal at the time with the language situation and the separatists and stuff like that, people, Anglophones were moving, out of Quebec at a very high rate. And jobs were disappearing, and then public at the time, my wife Joanne wanted to be a school teacher. Well, because the Anglophones are leaving the city, the prospect of being a school teacher at an English school in Montreal was probably not looking that good. And right around that time, I might have mentioned this at another video. I think you know the story, but there was still in Montreal in 1979, there were still places where they had shows 6 nights a week. And one of them was at one of the big hotels. I forget what it's called, but the show place, dining room, show bar, whatever, was called the Caf Collins. And the Queen Elizabeth Hotel had a showroom too, where there was 6 nights a week. People went for dinner and dancing, and there was a show.
This is where Real recommended you for something?
And Real recommended me at the Caf Collins.
Yes.
The band leader had been doing it for like 25 or 30 years, and they decided to terminate the contract and change the band leader. I don't know whether they wanted to like modernize the music a little bit. And so there was a different band leader. Real was doing it, and he didn't want to work 6 nights a week anymore. He was like, he'd done that and paid those dues. So he kept pushing to have me hired, and the guy kept saying, the band leader kept saying, we have no experience. And Real's like, well, how's he going to get experience if he does? Somebody like you doesn't. If we don't hire these guys to let them get experience. Well, that's not my problem.
I can't get a job because I don't have experience. I can't get experience because I don't have a job. Exactly. As the circle goes and goes,
So of course I didn't get the gig, which then was like, yeah, that's just a little bit more incentive, a dose of reality in Montreal being an Anglophone, because I think that factored into it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then, and I think I've told you this story, but I'm going to tell it again, with our mutual friend, Dave Rice, playing in a sax quartet with 3 francophones. And of course, as is often the case when you have like a garage band or something like that, and you want to get rid of somebody, nobody has the balls to boot them out. So you disband, you break up the band, and then you reform the band without the person,
Yeah.
So anyway, Dave shows up to one of the rehearsals. He's like, where the hell is everybody? And he's the only Anglophone. I don't know if I said that.
Yeah.
Where the hell is everybody? They changed the location. They never told him. So anyway, he tracks them down. He's like, so what's up? They're like, yeah, so we're going to go with somebody different.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that he's told me that he found out who replaced him. That was a francophone.
Yeah, we're going to say tabernacle to that is what they said.
And I was in a rehearsal band. It was called the Co-op Big Band with Jean-Pierre Zanella. You might know.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He's a wonderful musician, super nice guy. And I'm pretty sure I was the only Anglophone in the band, in the trumpet section. And for the most part, they were nice to me because I think musicians are generally pretty cool. But every once in a while, they'd be talking French. But in that situation, if they're talking about the music and stuff like that, I had enough of a vocabulary and understanding. I could follow what was going on. But every once in a while, then he'd switch to English and go, okay, let's go from letter G once more for Greg. So they would be giving me these little digs, And I was like, whatever, So the incentive was to leave Montreal and go west, young man. And that's how we ended up in Calgary.
Dave was here first? Or you were here first? Dave was here first? Or Dave Rice? Or you were here?
My friend Dave Luker. Yeah, he came out in.
Oh, Dave Luker was here first, not Dave Rice.
Oh, yeah. No, not Dave Rice. No.
Okay.
Dave Rice was after me. Dave Luker went out first because same thing. He wanted to play the drums. He wanted to play music, you know. And his wife was an air hostess with Air Canada, and Air Canada was based out of Calgary. I don't know if it still is. And so she got transported off to Calgary, and he went too, because he knew that the music scene was kind of cooking, and he played any kind of music too, and he was in rock bands and stuff. Talking with John DeWall on our last video, they're talking about some of those hotels that you brought up. Dave was doing that circuit, you know, playing at the Crossroads and playing wherever with some kind of rock band, you know. And then when I got there, I was probably a little bit more the catalyst to start trying to get some jazz stuff going, you know, which he wanted to do too. He certainly liked playing jazz, but.
Well, and I first met Dave Luker when I started it with your big band in 1984 or 85 or whatever it was. Yeah, Dave was playing drums at the time.
Yeah. No, we were pretty tight back then. We haven't been in touch for the longest time, but we were very, very tight. We were good, very good friends at the time. I can remember being in. I lived with him till found my own place with Joanne, you know. And we practiced together, and I tell my students this too. Now, this is predates iReal Pro and all of this business. Now, of course, there were Aerosoul records. This predates CDs even. So, but I can remember, and it was Autumn Leaves, man. We're playing Autumn Leaves, and I was learning how to, like, you know, play without a rhythm section, play without having to hear the harmony, like basically play with a metronome, right? Keep the form, keep time. But we do it together. And I can remember him saying, okay, can you mark off every 4 bars for me? You know, so play the head, you know, and take a chorus, he'd take a chorus, take a chorus, he'd take a chorus. So to help me keep my time straight and keep track, I'm like, okay, mark off every 4 times. Because I could sense when I would get off, you know. I'm like, mark off every 4 bars for me, you know, and I get that happening. And then, you know, after a while, I was like, okay, mark off every 8 bars, you know. Okay, just mark off the bridge for me in the top of the form. And then first thing you know, it was like, yeah, I don't need that help anymore. You know, I was confident that where I was. And then it was helpful for him too, when he's taking his chorus, to have somebody there that's keeping him on track too, in terms of, you know, I do this if that's where I thought the bridge should have been, you know. So we used to practice together. And then I went out, I think this is in one of the other videos. I went out in 79 to check it out first. I stayed a month, I think, and stayed with Dave. And then that's when I decided, yeah, this could work. And then we moved out in 1980. And then I can't remember when Dave Rice would have come out. A couple of years. We were there a couple of years before he came out.
Well, I started taking lessons with Dave in grade 10. Which for me would have been the fall of 1982, winter 1983.
Yeah, that sounds about right then. And he would have come maybe 2 years after me. Because we kept in touch. The 3 of us were tight, you know. I can remember Dave Rice showing up to my house in Montreal, because I wasn't that keen to drive, because my dad, I think I was 20. I always used to think I was 18, but I think I was 19 or 20 when my dad died. He got hit by a car. He was a pedestrian crossing the street, and he got hit, and he died from his injuries. And so, you know, you're that age, you're kind of freaked out with cars and shit. So I didn't start driving till I was 21. And then the whole idea of the learner's permit, you know, you got to have a licensed driver in the car with you while you're practicing. So we were going to go to some rehearsal, and I was like, well, come to my house. He's like, I'll come and pick you up. And I was like, well, come to my house. I said, let me take my mom's car so I can practice my driving. I said, and you're the designated driver in the car with me. He's like, oh, yeah, cool, no problem. So he shows up. He's got his hockey gear on. He's got his helmet. He's got his shoulder pads. He's like, okay, I'm ready to get in the car with you. That was pretty funny. I was like, thanks a lot, Dave. We were howling, you know. So, but yeah, I guess Calgary didn't really work out for him. I don't think they were that happy there. And his wife she got a degree in social work. And then I guess they moved back to Montreal. Oh, no, I think they went to Toronto. They went to Toronto after Calgary.
Yeah, and I was out in Toronto in the summer of 1988, and actually stayed at his house. And that's the last that I've talked to him or seen him. And you just left.
I know my battery's dying.
Ah! Uh-oh. Do you have a cord?
Yeah, I'm plugging it in right now.
Okay. Yeah, this is going to become a monologue soon. This is where normally, if I had my horn, I'd break into like "Girl from Ipanema" or something like that while we're waiting. But okay.
Cool.
Okay, we're back. We're back.
Yeah. And you were talking about Dave Rice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was the last time I saw him was the summer of 1988, and I stayed at his house for a couple of nights, a night or two, something like that. And that's the last I've seen him or talked to him. And I remember, I don't know if you remember from Central Memorial days, Karine Hannert, who was a student who was a year behind me. She was in the jazz band. She was a flute player in the concert band, but a saxophone in the jazz band. I don't know if you remember her or not. But she told me that I think it was 2 or 3 years later she saw him in Toronto. But after that, I haven't heard anything. I haven't.
Yeah, I've never heard boo from him since he moved away.
Yeah.
Bruce Redstone, a saxophone player, mutual friend of ours, he had some information about him one time. I think he said he showed up to a rehearsal band in Toronto and Dave was there. And
yeah, Bruce and I are Facebook friends, so we don't speak too much as far as messages or anything like that, but we have crossed paths on Faceplant a couple of times over the years. So because he's out in Toronto as well, as you said, yeah. So
yeah.
So
yeah, I was just reminded of you've heard me speak about Andrew Homsey, who was one of my profs at Concordia and who lives here now. And I was telling this story just to somebody else the other day. That's why I just thought of it. Homsey recommended me to play in a Dixieland band. That was actually a gigging band around Montreal. And they were, I think, mostly amateurs. I think the bass player was a pro. Have you ever heard of the McGarrigle sisters? A folk act?
No.
I think, I Googled them recently. I was thinking about that. I Googled them, and I think they're still doing something. Anyway, the bass player played with them. So he was the closest to a pro. And I remember going to the rehearsal, and I just didn't know a lot of tunes, right? So I guess there was a few lead sheets. So I guess I passed the audition. I cut it. So they're like, okay, and they gave me a cassette. They're like, I think the rehearsal, let's say it was a Tuesday. He's like, okay, here's a cassette. Go learn the 20 tunes on it. Go learn them for Friday. We have a gig. I was like, I didn't trust myself that I could learn 20 tunes by heart in 4 days or 5 days. So as I was learning them, I wrote them out. I notated them. But this time I notated them properly in music notation. So I showed up to the gig with my music stand and the charts and stuff, and they were like, whatever. Because they knew I was under the gun. And got through the gigs okay. We played a couple of times, and we played at this pub at the Atwater Metro Station in Montreal. I wonder if it's still there. It's called the Maidenhead. So the band designated band leader, I think it was the played soprano sax and clarinet. I think he was the one that said, okay, look, we got to sing. People love it when people sing. So everybody's going to sing a tune. You got to pick a tune and sing a tune. So I was like, what the hell am I going to sing? So I chose I Want a Girl, just like the girl that married dear old dad. This is probably from the 20s, it's a suitable tune. So that was the number that I sang. So Homsey comes to one of the gigs, right? And I had teased the shit out of him about this. I'm like, I could have had a career as a singer. Could have been a singer, trumpet player. I said, and I'll tell this in a company of a bunch of people with Homsey there, And I'm like, yeah, but years ago, I said, one of my main mentors, one of my profs, started to laugh when I was singing. I said, and that just quashed my whatever hopes and dreams that I had to be a singer. I said, we're wiped out right there and then. And of course he's laughing, you know. The rest of them have no clue that it's him, and they're like, oh, that's terrible. Who would say that? That's awful.
Yes.
So,
what an awful person.
So funny. So yeah, I'm singing I Want a Girl just like the girl. And I thought I did it okay, you know. And so the first time I embarrassed him and told him that. I didn't do it in front of anybody else. I just told him. He's like, well, I wasn't laughing at it because it was bad. He says, just know the kind of person you are. He says, and just, so to see you singing on the stage was funny. I was like, yeah, I get that.
I don't think I've even seen that. I don't think I've ever seen you sing a tune before.
Oh, well, you
just
know,
goofing around maybe, but not actually grabbing the mic and giving her.
Oh no! Well, you know, if you were in my second year jazz theory class, jazz improv class at school, you would hear me sing.
You need to record that.
I got and you know Kirk McDonald. I don't know if I
do.
You this story. So I heard this by way of David Braid. Do you know David? So
I know of
David
him.
Braid, okay, so David Braid told me that at U of T, in one of Kirk's classes, he makes every non-singer sing a tune with the rhythm section. And I think David said that it was a ballad. They had to get up, sing a ballad with the rhythm section, and then play it on their horn or their instrument. And I was like, that's freaking brilliant. That's a great idea. So I immediately incorporated that into my second year improv class, right? Second term, second year, they got to do it. So the very first time I implement this tune, it was a saxophone player. And he still plays. I think his name is Dave Lawson. He lives in Victoria. And I think he plays with some kind of a ska band or something that goes and tours around Canada and shit. So he's making it happen. I don't think he has a day, well, maybe now he has a day job, but a super good guy and a good player. So anyway, sitting in the class, and I know I digress. So before that happened, one of the students is like, well, you going to do it? I was like, what? They're like, are you going to sing a song? You going to sing a tune with the rhythm section? Because they knew I played the trumpet. I played it in class. And I'm like, that's a fair question, man. I better put my money where my mouth is. If I'm asking them to do it, I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go first. And I chose, but not for me. So anyway, I show up, you know, I got my rhythm. I made sure that I picked the students in the class that I knew could handle it. I said, you guys can read the chart if you like, but we're going to do, but not for me. You're going to give me an introduction. I'm going to sing it, and you tag it, and that's the end of it. They're like, fine. Oh, and I said, I'll play a chorus on my trumpet, then tag it and play it out. Perfect. So anyway, I'm getting ready to do this, and I see David. This is the flip phones. I see him get his phone out. I see him flip it over. And I'm like, oh, hold on a second, everybody. I was like, so are you going to video record this? Because if you're going to video record me, I'm going to video record you. And I think I have way more friends on Facebook than you do. And he's like, puts the phone away. So funny. So yeah, so they have to. So you'd hear me sing. I've done My Foolish Heart, but not for me. Oh, I can't remember them all, but I've sung. Oh, probably I Can't Get Started because it's the trumpet ballad, right?
The Maynard version, or the regular version?
The regular version. Okay. I might have changed. No, I might have sung Maynard's words. And then the year that Lauren, my daughter, was in the class, I showed up. It was so funny. There were three, you know, there's always a few singers in the class, you know, and they're always like such wimps about taking care of their voice. So I showed up with a scarf around my neck, right? And my herbal tea.
Yes, of course.
And I'm whispering, which of course, if you know stuff about the voice, whispering's worse.
Yes. Apparently
it's harder on your voice. I don't think I knew that at the time. I think Lauren had to tell me. So I'm whispering because I'm saving my voice for my performance. And a couple of the singers, they're getting pissed, right? Because they're clearly making fun of them. And Lauren's there, and she's like elbowing them. They're like, she's like, don't buy into it. Leave him be. Don't say anything. He's doing it on purpose. Just leave it. Ignore him.
This is what he does.
And she's busting my chops because she can. She's a kid, you know. But she's encouraging the other ones to not pay any attention to me, you know. It's pretty funny. So, yeah, no, I think they don't always get it as to why they should be doing it. They're young and foolish, as I was, so I try not to call them out on it too much. But some of them don't take it seriously, you know. So you got somebody who's oh, I won't say his name, but you know, let's say a drummer with a baritone voice and trying to sing, "Look at me, I'm as helpless as a kid." I'm like, so he got a shitty mark. And he's like, "Why did I get a shitty mark? I'm not a singer. That's not fair that you judge me as." I said, "No, that's not why you got a shitty mark." I said, "You didn't take it seriously, and you didn't transpose it to a key where you can sing it," which is what the instructions were for everybody. You transpose it to a key where you're going to sing it. This isn't about singing. This is about, in terms of the quality of your singing voice, this is about internalizing a melody, so that you can pick up your instrument and figure out how to play. Well, I played the drums. I'm like, okay, go pick it up with one finger on the piano. Go grab two mallets and figure it out on the xylophone or the marimba. I said, but if you can't sing it, you're not going to be able to play it. So you got a shitty mark. So sometimes they don't take it seriously, you know. But the ones that do, then they get it, you know. And the very first time, I didn't tell them that after they were done singing it, they had to play it. So the first person that went after me, I'm like, they sang it, they did pretty good. And I'm like, okay, play the instrument. They're like, what? I was like, play it on your instrument now. Well, I didn't learn it on my instrument. I'm like, well, you missed the whole point of doing this. So I figured it, rather than to tell them ahead of time that they need to play it on their instrument, I thought putting it to them that way and kind of putting a kid on the spot, but in a polite kind of way. Wasn't ridiculing them or anything. I just used them as an example, sort of thing. They were like, oh, I was like, yeah. So if you can't sing it in the standard key and you got to learn it in a different key, then learn it in that key that you sang it. So you're making the connection from here to here, or whatever instrument you play. So got off on a tangent about me singing, but Kirk's idea of having the non-singers sing a song is brilliant.
I've also recommended to my students, even though it's not a requirement, but to learn the lyrics of the song, just to understand the story behind it. You know, just get a little bit, you get a little bit more intimate with the song itself, and understand the reason why it was written and the context of it, and the meaning behind it, and all that stuff. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt to know that, you know, as well. So yeah, and that's why I'm, you know, and I've been lucky to tour and play with a lot of really good singers over the years, and I still listen to a lot of, you know, jazz vocal stuff, and you know, just to, if nothing else, to internalize lyrics, and also to kind of get their interpretation of the phrasing, how they phrase the melody, and how they interpret the melody, you know, because that's, to me, with vocalists, it's kind of like a mutual using, as it were, where we kind of steal their phrasing and the way they interpret melodies, and then they kind of steal our soloing to do the scat singing. So it's kind of it's kind of like a back and forth kind of thing. Because I know that the singers like to analyze horn players to be able to get the scat thing down. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement with that. And it was, I think it was Lester Young, that there's a quote about Lester Young saying, "Learn the lyrics." And then I think I saw Dexter Gordon twice in Montreal, once at a small jazz club and once at Place des Arts. And well, I'd smoked a joint. I shouldn't say that, it was illegal at the time. And I was sitting at the bar.
Now you're in shit.
And Dexter, even back then, I think I smoked a joint like twice a year. Probably one of my friends had one. And I was sitting at the bar, and Dexter recited the lyrics to Polka Dots and Moonbeams before he played it. The whole tune, the whole chorus. And I was like, holy shit, man. Yeah, he knows the words to the tunes. You know? And of course, it's going to affect how you phrase it, because unless you're singing at an American national anthem, where every note has a 16 or 20 note melisma to it, you're not going to go, "I've been around the world in a plane."
No kidding.
You're not going to do that.
Yeah.
You know? Because nobody would freaking sing it like that.
Yeah.
unless it
A
was
country dance was being held in a garden.
So why would you play it like that? You know, you might want to embellish it a bit. I've been around the world in a plane, a little diddly thing like that,
Sure.
maybe. But in terms of and how far away, how rhythmic are you going to be, and stray from the rhythm of the lyrics too? So, no, I think knowing the words is really important.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Just for the record, we're at about 40 minutes. We're just over 40 minutes now.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if you want to cut it off here and start another, or just cut it off here for now, and
yeah, cut it off here, and then
okay.
We can pick it up at another time, or pick it up
Sure.
right afterwards.
We can always intersperse with these things, blah blah blah.
Yeah. What happened with the part where my battery died?
I paused it.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah. So I'll just put this forward to anybody else who's watching, or anybody who's watching. If you want to put forward any potential topic suggestions, music topic suggestions, not who do we think is going to win the Super Bowl or anything like that. But although there maybe you have an opinion on that, but you know, any music topic suggestions for us to discuss on here, send me an email. My address is youtube@belltones.ca. I'll put it on the when I post this video. But YouTube, youtube @belltones.ca, belltones.ca. So, and then maybe we can get some feedback from people who are listening. That might be an interesting way to look at things too. See what.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love questions.
Yeah. So if anybody has anything they want to add, then just send that along, and I'll bring it up and we'll do it. So, and we'll also try to get some more guests on here soon too. So, but I guess, yeah, we're probably about 42 minutes now, something like that. Yeah, 42, 43. So, okay, I'm going to shut her down here then, and thank you for your time. And we'll resume again, I don't know, fairly soon with something else. Who knows what it's going to be? We don't know yet. So
that's right.
But we'll know. You'll know when we know. Okay. All right. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah, cheers.